Do you know how powerful you are?
Welcome to Rise Urban Nation.
Welcome everybody to Rise Urban Nation.
Reshaping and elevating your mindset to help you achieve what you believe.
Sometimes we don't even see our own greatness. You can't be what you can't see.
And connecting Black cultures to build a community of talent and success.
Black people need to realize that they are assets. You are an asset.
When we rise, you rise.
Come together as a group.
This is Rise Urban Nation with Terrell Simmons.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Raspreneurs. This next interview, that person that I'm introducing you to, her name is Johann. And the funny thing about this story is when I first started doing the interview, I was on a prep call and it started getting really good. And I was like, you know what? Let me just record some of this. So maybe I can insert some of it into the interview. The other funny thing about it is this is the first time I got to see her in person, and I've been on a phone call with her in a meeting, and I really didn't know that I had been on that meeting and phone call until like halfway through the interview, right? Which is so embarrassing, not realizing that, you know, this person seems familiar. I'm not sure if I met him before or what the case was, but I ended up figuring out as we got further along in our conversation. She is the CEO of Synergy, which is a commercial cannabis licensing, acquisition, and compliance, which is let me rephrase. Let me start back from the beginning. Johann is the founder and CEO of Synergy, and basically what Synergy does, it's a commercial cannabis licensing, acquisition, and compliance agency, and she's an expert in that space. She's the best-selling author of the successful Canna-preneur book, and she's a U.S. Navy veteran and a cannabis advocate and entrepreneur. And she has a testimony to this, which cannabis has like really helped her life tremendously. And she's really wanting to educate, and I got a really good education lesson from her. I often think from hearing her story and other people who are in that cannabis space, to be an entrepreneur in that space, I give it a shout out to them, because it takes an amazing grit and creativity to be successful in that space, because you always have to be evolving, right? Great conversation with her. Can't wait for you guys to dive in and hear about some of her journey, some of her tips, her practices and theories to life, and get this education lesson on cannabis and the great many attributes that it could have to our world and society. So without further ado, Johann.
I want people to see more of us doing, just creating dope shit, like
creating more than music, and you know what I'm saying? Stuff like, or playing basketball, or, handling a ball.
Yeah. So that's what this is all about. And then highlighting different people and like entrepreneurs and creators in different spaces, community leaders, and me just kind of sharing your story, your career journey, you defining success for you. And then anything that you have to offer the community. I'm trying to connect the Black community and the African community and the diaspora.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of disconnect there. And what Shola introduced me to is there's a whole slew of rich Nigerians who would be willing to invest in Black entrepreneurship.
Right.
And then why can't we get these two worlds together and stretch the Black dollar outside of the U.S. and make it international, and we create our own thing.
We create our own table and then invite ourselves to come sit at it, as opposed to barking to have a place at a table that's already saturated. Number one, doesn't cater to our communities, as even if they do, not as impactful as it would be coming from within, from us, and creating that solid foundation for all of us to step on that and keep building from there.
Absolutely.
I mean, that is a beautiful thing, to know that energy is out there, and like people like yourselves, myself, Shola, and it's just like a whole movement right now, and it's overdue. It's super inspiring, and we are, I feel like this is the spark that we needed, to keep that push, to push that forward. And then break those generational curses and
Yes.
and things that have been holding us back, and honestly, and do things differently, because we have been doing a lot of the same. And I'm not trying to say that, people were doing the wrong things, but for instance, we can't continue to march and to ask and request. We need to do a different approach from building ourselves. Let's start building and see what we attract in the process of building to help build, as opposed to asking for somebody's sympathy, asking somebody to understand why they shouldn't say certain things, why your company shouldn't do certain. No, we need to start building our own companies and modeling. Now, hey, this is how you do it. How we're doing it here. This is how you should be doing it. You know what I'm saying?
I know what you're saying.
And I feel like that creates like a more groundbreaking situation that eliminates the having to ask. It's like, no, this is how you do it. Here's the blueprint. Either follow it or get out my way kind of situation. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's what's happening now. We're tired of asking. And I think it's a generational thing. Now we're like, all right, well, we can do something with a stick and some mud here, and then we'll start there,
Yeah.
And look at where that it's gotten our people inspired to, hey, oh, well, that person's doing it. I can do it. Your daughter there behind you sees what you're doing. Imagine what she's going to do. Can you imagine?
Oh, she gonna be a trailblazer. So I'm letting her know. We was watching the inaugurations, and that young lady that stepped on the podium and gave that poem, she had me crying in the morning. I was like, baby girl.
Yeah, everybody.
You could be anything.
Anything.
You see that? Don't let these white men or whoever tells you can't be anything. You could be anything. Don't let them do it to you, baby girl.
No, and you know what? Just let her know, like, they're not doing it to you. If you allowing just that narrative to become the reality, that's what really stops us. Because nobody's here telling you and me do or don't do. We listen and we've seen, and all these images that come in our heads that we consume. That's what we see. Man, we don't see. Well, I don't see anybody in the science lab on TV or on the newspaper or on the history books that looks like me. So I guess that's not something that I can do. Now I see the janitor, so maybe that's all I can do. But you know what I'm saying? That is not necessarily a reality. It's just something that you accept because you're not seeing it in real life. So it's a beautiful thing that now our children are able to see it, in their screens, which is where they usually, unfortunately, have most of their eyes. So that's where we need it, just to plug ourselves in that channel. Yeah. Here we are. We're Black. We're beautiful. We're smart. We're geniuses. We're changed. You know what I'm saying?
We're a lot of things, and I gotta. All these different countries, U.S. too, got to get out of this mindset that the Black culture is a monolith. That just because we see one aspect of it, that's the whole group. That's them. Nah, we a lot of different things. Exactly.
So what a time to be alive. Is what I like to say.
So wait, tell me about because Shola never told me about you as a business woman and what you create. And tell me more about this thing.
Was it you that we were on the phone the other day? Where we were talking about the political aspect of cannabis.
Oh, yeah. Structure of your business. What is it?
So my business has two parts. One is licensing, acquisition, and compliance management for companies that are operating in the regulated space. And then the other one is media production and content marketing. So we create content for the cannabis space, own content that I pretty much film and direct. And then we have the brands that give us content to put through our channels that we have.
Nice.
So I started in the space in 2014. I got out of the military. I was dealing with PTSD and all of that. Somebody introduced me to cannabis as medicine, which I had no idea that was a thing, until I felt the immediate benefits when I did it for the first time. And I was like, why is this illegal? The stuff that the VA is trying to do with me in a year, this solved it literally in 20 minutes. Like, why is this illegal? So I just went down that rabbit hole.
Yeah. Do you mind sharing real quick? What is it that you, if you don't mind, like what problem did it help you solve for you?
So when I was in the military, I was in an accident. I had a concussion from that accident. I was blown by jet blast while I was working on the aircraft and a flight deck of an aircraft carrier. So that created issues for me, trouble sleeping. I literally could not sleep more than I slept in intervals of 45 minutes for 3 years. So you can imagine the level of tension that I had. My body pretty much forgot to eat. Like, I didn't eat. I had to set alarms to eat because that was not a thing that was being processed. On the day of the accident, so obviously now you know that I'm Dominican. I lost the English language for about 20, almost half an hour. I could not process the English language. I could understand it. If you were talking to me, you're telling me what to do, or I can understand it, but I couldn't speak it. I was just not able to. So you can only imagine the fog that I was in that moment, besides the pain. So that happened while I was my second year in the military. So for 2 years, I was just dealing with the lack of sleep. I was drinking NyQuil to fall asleep. That's what I was literally downing NyQuil, because I don't a lot of people drink alcohol too. In the military, I hate alcohol. I think it tastes like shit. I mean, NyQuil tastes like shit too, but I figured it was better for my liver. These are the things that I'm telling myself, right? Trying to deal with the situation. So when I got out, and now I no longer had that fast-paced military life, it kind of things slow down, all the way down. And I went down, downward spiraled with depression, anxiety, just this tense type of living situation. And one day another veteran came and was like, you should smoke this joint with me. And I'm like, no, I don't do drugs, what, type of situation. And he's like, dude, please come. You need to I sense your energy. It's super tense. Let's smoke this joint together. And when I tell you that within 10 minutes of smoking, I literally, for the first time in 3 years, just felt like myself. Essentially, I was like, that's it. I'm in my mind. I'm like, that's me right here. I feel really well right now. I didn't feel that tense on my neck, and it was just a complete, I can find, waiting to exhale. And I kind of got that breath. And from that moment, I asked him, what is in this? I had no idea. I completely ignorant to the fact that it was just a plant, that people can grow it, all of that, And then I just started educating myself. And within that journey, when I started just reading about the medical benefits, and didn't even know that I had been living in California for 4 years. I didn't even know that it was legal or at least for medical purposes at that point. Went to a dispensary for the first time. My mind was blown. Not just because at that point I already understood the medical benefits. I experienced it in my own skin. But then I realized, and I wrote a book about this. Then I realized when I went to the dispensary, all the people that were there, the diversity, white people, Mexican people, me, black people. And obviously to me, I always associated with just being a lazy person, the narrative or whatever the case, or that your brain cells would die and all that other BS that's not real. But anyway, when I'm there at the dispensary, I'm cha-ching. I'm just thinking not only does this help people, obviously there's a high demand for it. I was like, you know what? I'm going to look into how to get into this industry. Right. And I kid you not, I literally, from that day, maybe 3 months later, I just randomly met somebody who was, transitioning into the legal space. And I asked them, I said, can I quit my job to work for you? I told him, I don't care if you can't pay me, like pay me when you can. And he said, okay. And the rest is history.
The rest is history. And that's how you broke into the industry.
Oh yeah. So that's how it happened. Essentially I helped that guy get the first the first Black owned cultivation license here in San Diego County, which we had. So at that point it was banned to grow in San Diego. So this guy that I was working with, super smart. He's like, how can we do this legally and then claim that we're the only ones doing it, you know? And guess what? He went and he pitched it to a tribal land, to a tribe here in Santa Isabel, you know, in the Julian area. And they were like, all right, let's do it. So we grew some, you know, beautiful flower over there. Back in 2016 when they had banned it here in San Diego. And we did it legally and had, you know, where we were able to claim that. And it's Black owned, and most people don't even know that.
Oh,
and
yeah.
No social equity, you know, no social equity application, nothing. Just us getting our brain together and just talking to the right people and getting the right systems in place to just get it done and thinking creatively, you know, outside of the box, because everybody was, oh, we can't grow legal. So everybody gave up. And, you know, we stayed looking because he was so fixated in making sure, you know, it was a legal situation because he wanted to raise capital.
Yeah.
And even take the company public at some point. And that's how, you know, you just sit there and you try to think outside of the box and make magic happen sometimes.
And that's the beauty of our people. We find a way to make things happen. We get creative, even in our most dire situations. We the only people I know that could turn top ramen into a gourmet dish.
Exactly. Just add a little shrimp. That's all you gotta do.
Find how to cook chitlins.
And make it a dish.
Make gourmet rice and wandules.
My favorite. Arroz con gandules.
Arroz con pollo. All my peoples out there, the fried plantanos.
Tostones.
Tostones, yes. Now you get me hungry. I want to go to a spot now.
My project was at first to bring like career and professional development to the Black and Brown community to elevate us, and it's evolved ever since then. And now I guess this podcast is an evolution of that.
Yeah. No, I'm thankful to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah. So welcome to another episode of Raspreneurs. My engineer is going to kill me because he's going to have a lot of edits to do because we kind of started our session yesterday, but you know, it's almost like shitty weed. When you got a good session going, you don't just stop, right?
Exactly. You keep it going.
You keep it going, puff, puff, pass. So we're going to get back into this conversation that we started from yesterday. You know what? I want to double back just a little bit, just to kind of talk about your career journey, because you've been in the military and then out the military. Yeah. I know usually people have a hard time transitioning out the military. So tell me like how your career journey was for the listeners.
So essentially, I was in the military. I graduated college, actually, joined the military. They paid for my student loans. So that was one of the reasons why I wanted to join. But essentially, if I'm completely transparent, I've always wanted to join the Navy since I was a kid. It was kind of like in my bucket list.
Really?
So, yeah. So when I was a kid, and I still have pictures of this little sailor suit that my mom bought me. Uh-huh. And I always used to say, I'm going to be a sailor. Even this is when I lived in the Dominican Republic, because as you know, I was born over there. Okay. I was always intrigued by that. So I did join. Again, they paid my student loans. While I was in there, I had an accident from which I had a concussion from. And like I told you yesterday, just created a whole bunch of problems, like mentally, forgetting like to eat, not sleeping, had a horrible sleeping pattern. Like I never slept for more than 45 minutes straight. So every like 45 minutes, I kept waking up and then being up for like an hour until I fell asleep again. So it was a horrible situation. So did 2 deployments. And when I got out was when I realized that there was a problem, especially, I think I mentioned that yesterday in our pre-interview, that when the Navy lifestyle kind of like completely slowed down, that's when I realized, oh my gosh, am I going to live like this the rest of my life? You know? Yeah. So that's when I got out of the Navy, and I started working for the Navy as a civilian while I met an individual randomly after I already had tried cannabis for medical purposes, which I don't know if we recorded this yesterday, but a friend just brought it to my house one time and said, hey, smoke this joint with me. You look a little tense. And it was a game changer. And essentially I was like, why is this illegal? Like, because when, I went to college and I smoked weed a few times in college, but the weed always made me like sleepy. So you know how you're in a party, you smoke a little and then you're like, all right, I'm leaving now kind of thing. So I was never like into it. I just thought, a matter of fact, I always wonder, why do people smoke this at parties? Like you want to fall asleep. But it was different. And that was in Pennsylvania. I went to school, University of Scranton in Pennsylvania. Once I tried it, I became so intrigued by it. And then started using it as a patient back in 2014 in California was medical only, which they had been since 1996. And I had no clue, because I was in the military.
Really?
Yeah.
In 1996?
That's when it passed. Yeah. It passed for medical purposes in 1996. And then essentially in 2018 was when it actually became legal for adult use.
Interesting. Correct me if I'm wrong. At the federal level, it's still illegal.
100%. It's still it's a Schedule 1 substance at the federal level. But currently there are 14 states that have, there's almost every state right now. There's 44 states that have legalized it for medical purposes only. And now 14 that have legalized it for adult use.
Wow. So it's about time that we just have the federal laws catch up.
No, 100%. And that's in the works. I mean, I was reading an article here this morning that we have the Democratic Party as the majority in our government right now. And guess what? I don't know if you know this, but the VP, Kamala Harris, she's championing what's called the MORE Act, the Marijuana Expungement and Reinvestment Act, where she's championing legalization for cannabis at a federal level and including social equity aspects in there. And obviously expungement of records for people that have. So personally, I think we've never been this close to legalization as we are today. So I think it's a great time to be a part of the industry right now.
That's a game changer right there. Could you imagine all of our peoples who've been locked up because of possession or usage,
which is, believe it or not, is like it's over 80% of the people that are incarcerated for cannabis is not for illicit commercial situations for cannabis, not for selling, not for producing.
Recreational?
It's for consumption, like having possession of like a certain amount or, consuming in public or something.
Wow.
Like that.
I thought it would have been more of those people who were just holding mass amounts.
No, that is, there's people in jail for one joint and mostly they look like you and me. So, and, other people too, because obviously in towns where we're not the majority, then obviously the majority of the people there who are arrested for cannabis are probably, troublemakers or something like that, or considered troublemakers. For the use of cannabis and probably get in trouble for that reason. But essentially, once I tried cannabis and did my research and realized that it was a huge industry in the making, I told you yesterday, I went to the dispensary the first time and I'm in there like 20 minutes and there's over 20 people that I counted from when I got there in the parking lot, people that we were in line, getting checked in with because at that point, you had a medical card. So you got checked in, they took your information, verified your card or whatever the case may be. And I see people coming in and out and I'm like, oh my God, I didn't realize how much people are into this. Because in Jersey, you know, it's like taboo. But in California, because it had been medically accepted since 1996, it's like a normal thing.
Right.
So I took the first opportunity when I met somebody that was in the industry. And the one thing that he kept mentioning is that he wanted to, you know, he was in the legal space. And I'm like, legal? Okay, I need to know what the difference is, you know. Mm-hmm. So I started looking into that, and I just asked him, can I work for you? Can I work for you? Can I work for you? I am super interested. This plant has healed me. And I want to bring this message in particularly because most of the people that are criminalized for being a consumer look like me. So I was like, I want to make sure that Black and brown people are educated about not only the benefits of using it for, you know, for medical situations, but also, hey, do not miss out on getting into this new industry that has so much potential.
Absolutely.
It's a multi-billion-dollar industry at a global level. And right now there's only 4 countries that have legalized it. 5 now with Mexico. So,
oh wow, I didn't know Mexico legalized
last month.
Oh wow, okay.
They had decriminalized it. I think back in 2008. They had said like you can have I forget. Don't quote me on how much you could have, but you were able to have like a personal amount on yourself. I don't remember if it was like an ounce or something like that. But yeah, they fully legalized it this last month.
That means Mexico, their economy might start booming if
Absolutely.
they start growing this and
if they really get into like the industrial hemp aspect of it, where, you know, it's not for consumption, it's actually for industrial products like paper, plastic, textiles, biofuels. You can do so much, you know, with the fiber of the hemp plant, which is, you know, pretty much the sister of the cannabis plant, except that is grown for the fiber and not for consumption.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't know this because back in, I want to say don't quote me, I might be wrong, 1800s, but back in our heyday, U.S. used to really the U.S. government relied on this hemp plant for all the usage of its paper, textiles, yes. and really to create the rope for the military because it had the strongest durability.
Yes, it did.
And a lot of things that the military used came from hemp.
Mm-hmm.
Until they decided to ban it because it was too close to marijuana for whatever reason.
I think they were so confused as to, well, what's the difference? And back in the day, you know, it wasn't that distinguishable, you know, because they look so similar. So they just piled it up in one, and obviously, which is stupid because it was obviously a racial situation. Cannabis prohibition started because the Mexicans, Japanese, and Blacks were the ones using it. So they started a campaign, you know, saying that, you know, these people smoke the marijuana and then, you know, rape our women and do these things, or, you know, think they're better than us or something like that.
Yeah, I remember that. That's around the Reagan area, the war on drugs.
No, that started before. That started like
in the
1930s. Oh, absolutely.
Wow.
1930s, the Reagan era. So in 1930s, they started criminalizing it. And then instead of criminalizing, so they required that you reported that you grew it. Like you had to, and essentially that is where the racial aspect was, because at that point, it was mostly Mexicans and people of color growing the cannabis that has the high THC that you would use for like adult use or whatever. So what they did was implement this laws that you have to put yourself on the list that you are doing that or growing that. And most of the people, pretty much it was just incriminating yourself. So then they thought that was, you know, there was a lawsuit that was against, you know, the Constitution to incriminalize yourself. So essentially they just then created later on the Schedule 1 substance situation, which, you know, then it's much later on. And here we are today where people are making so much money out of it. There's still people in jail, which will always be the elephant in the room in this for the world, because it's not just America. You know, America started that and the whole world follows suit, except guess who didn't follow suit?
Who?
China did not follow suit in including hemp in that whole situation. So this whole time where cannabis has been illegal worldwide, China, obviously hemp is a useful product. So China has been supplying hemp to the whole world while the whole world decided to shut it down completely.
Look, good for you, China. Look at China. See,
Right?
China,
You know.
China gonna be running the whole world
Thank
soon.
you.
I swear. I think, and then they did. The U.S. government did such a good job at stigmatizing this product, this plant that is so good for us. There's so many benefits, even from the sister plant hemp. If you were to plant that in soil, it enriches the soil. It also helps clean out the
CO2,
ozone layer.
yep.
And you could rotate your crops with that. Take the hemp plant out
And
there,
then
put some new crops in there.
So you tell me,
Yeah,
how did that make sense to stop that? Like, it doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't at all. So, I think what is the biggest thing we need to do to obviously education to the general public to destigmatize, let's say, how we look at this plant and look at all the good benefits and usage.
Well, that's why I started my company, Synergy. So essentially, I started helping cannabis operators that were looking to get into the legal space, get their licensing here in the state of California. And that's where I noticed, I was like, oh my gosh, there's so much stigma. Not only obviously in the consumption aspect, but even in doing business in places that is legal, you know? So I realized education and people seeing these images is so important, especially for people of color representation. Like me having this conversation of somebody that has been in the space since 2014. I went through the legal only market in San Diego. I have worked on ordinances creations in tribal land, and now most recently working in the adult use market. You know, and having these conversations with you, see all that knowledge that you have about hemp. I, for my company Synergy, then started a media production aspect branch where that's what we do. We create content for the space, showing the truth about it. So I started a talk show format event that we had live audience, 100 people. It was here in San Diego prior to COVID, sold out the 3 times. I started doing it monthly at the end of 2019. And then COVID struck shortly after on March. So we had to cancel our March one. And it pivoted to creating pre-recorded content and still putting out the information out there for people, you know, having these conversations and just pushing the agenda forward. And you'd be, are you on the Clubhouse app?
Yeah, I'm on the Clubhouse app. That be jumping.
Yeah, so there, I've met so many people that have heard me speak, and they get in my DMs like, I'm starting a business. You know, I heard you. I had no idea, you know, that it was a viable industry like that, specifically because they live in like states where it's still illegal, perhaps. But as you know, CBD comes from the cannabis plant. It's just a cannabinoid. Yeah. So essentially, CBD is federally legal. So if you wanted to get in the space, you know, you can start there, or you can start by being an ancillary company where you provide services to support, because that's still being a part of the industry. The industry needs so much help right now. I mean, as you know, accounting in this space because of the federal legalization is important. So if you're an accountant that can focus on helping these companies, making sure they have their books good to go, you will also capitalize from the cannabis space. And that's the type of information that you know, we're putting out through my Synergy Universe. So please visit our website, synergyuniverse.io, and check out what we're doing.
I'll put all the links in the show notes too.
Yeah,
so
please.
In case you guys didn't get it and you feel like you have to rewind and loop it, or you driving, don't worry. It's in the show notes. I'll put everything to connect with this young lady. So, man, we went on a tangent about the whole history and so forth. Let me reel it back real quick. So, first job was kind of military school. Went to actually let me go even further back, because sometimes I get people who always say, well, I can't do that now, it's too late for me. And or you might have a young person who is interested in this career pathway, and I'm like, you know, I have, you know, my first job, unfortunately I can't get into the space because I don't have any experience or anything. And, you know, here's McDonald's. And I was like, man, I don't need to be working at McDonald's because there's no benefit to that. And I always try to tell young people there's benefits to working everywhere.
Absolutely.
There's something that you will learn from your first job that you
Mhm.
could take. And sometimes you need that first job to grow into the person you need to be for the job that you want to have.
Exactly.
What
I
was
tell that
your
to young people all the time.
what was your absolute first job that you ever got paid for?
If you're talking about when I first ever got paid for something, living in the Dominican Republic. I started a little entrepreneurial weekend situation. So in the Caribbean, and even here in California sometimes, but over there so I realized people selling fruit on the side of the streets, and there's fruit everywhere. So I walked around, my neighborhood picking like mangoes, avocados, Caribbean cherries that are completely different than the ones here. What else? Oranges, lemons. And I just picked all the neighbors, and you'll see me in the neighbors' backyards just grabbing some. And then I went in front of my house. I set up a little like picnic table and situation. And I made my first like that. And that's like probably like $2. I made like 50 pesos back in the day. And guess
Look at you. You're a little entrepreneur. You probably sold some fruit back to the same neighbors that was walking by.
You know it. To the same neighbors that I took it from. But they were so supportive, they bought it from me. And then essentially I used the money to buy ingredients to make pizza from scratch. That was my first investment in food.
Okay, all right. So you've been having the munchies ever since you was little, huh?
There you go. That's a good way to put it. Yeah. But my first job, I worked in my high school. I was really good in math. I was a math tutor in high school. So that was my first job, and I kind of didn't see it as a job because I was just usually helping my classmates with the same homeworks we have. Essentially, I worked outside of like that setting, which was kind of like not necessarily a real employment type of situation. My first job was working at Hollywood Video at a video rental. Kids will never know.
No, they won't. I remember Hollywood Video around the same time as Blockbuster. Yep.
So I had one literally 2 blocks away from my house. My mom actually, so I started work. That was a summer job. I think it was my junior year in high school. And I was, in AP classes. And so I had a really hardcore schedule at home, but I like making money. Okay. And because my parents are both entrepreneurs. So I've never seen my parents really working for someone else. But I didn't see how I can do that besides selling fruits in the street. So, and in America, that would have been like not that acceptable for a child. But essentially,
they're like, whose kid is this?
I know, and remove them from them. In any case, the first time that I came home, like past midnight from my job, my mom was like, "No, you cannot do that. You have to be in bed by at least 10:30 and be in class, blah, blah, blah." So I had to quit, and not because I wanted to. I thought I could do it, but my parents didn't allow it.
I got to say, my dad was the same way. He was a stickler about education. Mm-hmm. Education came first before everything. Mm-hmm. So, and that's usually how immigrant parents are. They want
100%.
Because they see education as the way out for their kids, even if they didn't take that path.
Yeah,
so.
Both my parents, like my dad graduated, I think, the 5th grade. He started working construction. He was like 11 or 12 in the Dominican Republic. And from there, he ultimately ended up owning a construction business. My mom, she graduated high school, but she started working at a beauty salon at 16. And by the time she graduated high school, she bought it herself. Nice. She still owns the property to this day. Nice. So
I love it.
And that's like the type of environment that I saw growing up. So that's why once I graduated college and entered the workforce, it didn't resonate with me. It was like every time I woke up, I had to convince myself to go to work. So I hated it. That's why I was like, I'd rather be in the military. At least I wanted to do that. So when I found out that they would pay for your student loans, I was like, no brainer. So I joined.
I could definitely see that in you because you just have that entrepreneurial spirit. So that a 9 to 5 would not be best suit for your gifts and talents. So what lessons would you say that you carry on to this day that you've learned from your first jobs and entrepreneurial journeys?
I would say from my first entrepreneurial experience back then, and honestly, let me tell you how that started. I was in school and I would see this one friend of mine. She would sell stickers. Like her parents would buy her stickers and whoever wanted one from her, she would sell it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you can make money like that. So I was at home like thinking like, what can I sell? And I'm thinking about toys, but I'm like, I like them. I'm not selling those. So I was like, oh, people sell fruit. Let me go with fruit picking, And so essentially what I learned from there is like creativity is key. You can get creative to solve any problem. You can get, if you're stuck, you just have to think outside the box, because essentially then that translated to the story that I told you yesterday when in 2016, San Diego had put out an ordinance so people can apply for a cultivation license, retail license. And then when city council switched, there was a switch in city council in the county, those people did away with those ordinance, and the licenses that were already in place, only the retail licenses were allowed to continue. And cultivation was banned. And then the individuals that I was working with, we were like, how can we do this? We started brainstorming to see how we can do it. And then we're like, where do they have no jurisdiction, but it's still here? Boom, tribal land. Went and pitched it and it worked. And then, we had a cultivation site. And we're able to, to feed the retail that, was approved, which for that retail, they had put a moratorium, which means that they only allowed us to work for 5 years. So I just want to send a quick shout out to San Diego County because this last month, they did away with that. They voted to actually open up the San Diego non-incorporated areas that are looking to create ordinances and implement cannabis programs. That's going to be a thing now. So I'm super excited for the future.
Nice. So I see that creativity, like thinking outside the box.
100%.
Like, Indian lands, they're unincorporated. They're not a part of this jurisdiction, and we can plant here.
Yeah,
so I like how you.
It was just talking to them, having the conversation. Usually that's all you have to do. Hey, this is what I'm thinking here, and this is how this can help you, and then us at the same time. And then boom, we help them create their ordinance. To this day, we're not there anymore, but to this day, they still have people cultivating in greenhouses and indoor in the Santa Isabel tribal lands.
Yeah, absolutely. So now what would you say were the steps that you took into your career, industry, and field? How did you, because yours was a journey, of course, but let's say somebody's listening to this and they like, oh, they're inspired. And they're like, oh, it's, the CBD cannabis has helped me too in my life. And you know what? I think I want to get into this business. What would you say were the steps that you took to kind of get into this business?
Well, I'm so glad that you asked that question, because I did write a book about my journey and my train of thought and the mindset that I had in getting involved in the space, and then how to be successful, which involved a lot of getting creative in a space that's so dynamic where laws change like this. Like, we went through that whole San Diego ban in cultivation, but we still cultivated. So legally, without having to get in trouble. So my book is called The Successful Canna-preneur. And in here, I depict the entire, from, before I joined the Navy up until the coronavirus struck. I'm talking about how we pivoted for certain things, the mindset that we had in order to not allow such circumstances that perhaps could have just ended the business, just take us under, and just rising above that by thinking creatively, in all aspects, financially, strategically, and then obviously in executing. My book is called The Successful Canna-preneur. It's available on Amazon.
I was just going to ask you that, but see, you're an entrepreneur already, so you already know how to sell it. You have to actually give me the link to that too, so that I can put it in the show notes for the
I will, and I'll send you a copy too, so you can have
I appreciate you, sis. So what's one good lesson life has taught you in this journey?
One good lesson. I've learned so many lessons. I mean, right. Last year was just a lesson after lesson after lesson after lesson. I mean, but the one lesson I would say that always stands out is never giving up. I mean, you have to be relentless in your pursuit, in particularly in the cannabis space where things can be here today and done away tomorrow because the law, because, the powers that be may have decided, something. So essentially using your intellect creatively and being persistent, consistent, and relentless in your pursuit is the key to,
Ooh, that's a gem right there. Can you repeat that? Repeat that for the people.
I cannot even. I was on the flow there. So just being consistent and relentless in your pursuit of what you really want to accomplish. I mean, number one, you have to know, you have to be specific. You have to be specific with your goal and your objective. Like, what do you really want to do? And, I talk about this in the book because my book is not necessarily so much about giving you information about the cannabis space. I have a whole chapter for the mindset aspect of it. And this is what I talk about. You have to you have to learn how to follow your instincts. You have to be specific in your approach. Like, where are you going? You can't just say, I'm just going to go somewhere, because clearly there won't be a path that you would be carving. You would be all over the place. So being consistent, persistent, and relentless in your pursuit of that particular goal, which ultimately should be, your wholehearted fulfillment, of your purpose. Pursuing that, and every time somebody tells you no, or everybody is against it, or whatever the case may be, that is just a sign for you to, I want to say, question. And not question because they're saying, but just it's an opportunity for you to understand even more, either more things that you should do more of, like things that you should do more of and things that you should do less of in order to get you places. Like, there's a quote by somebody, and I can never remember who said it, but they say that life is just a bunch of experiments. You learn to do more of what works, that pushes you forward, and less. A lot of times and less of the things that keep you either stuck or put you steps back. So the key is identifying when you're stuck because you keep doing the same thing. So essentially, once you change something in that equation, you're either going to know like what was wrong there and then stop doing it and then do whatever's going to push you forward, or whatever was keeping you back. So it's a bunch of experiments. And then looking at it from that perspective and not seeing it as, oh, my life sucks, I'm just stuck. No, that's the opportunity for you to identify what is it that you've been doing wrong. It's just experiments. Like, there's an experiment that you keep putting ingredients there that keeps you stuck. Change the formula.
Ooh, I like it.
And you'll see how something else is going to happen and take you somewhere further.
I love that you like to use food analogies like me.
I love food.
I love food too. So two key things that you mentioned in there that was just right on par with some of the things I like to teach. Setting SMART goals where you have to be specific, right? About what that is. We also talked about a little bit about mindset. You tapped into that a little bit, and then using every no or every hurdle as an opportunity to seek, whether it be the truth or answer to something, right? And it's just it's an opportunity to find that yes, or what is hindering
absolutely
that person from moving forward. So I feel like that advice is crucially needed for somebody who's going to enter the space in the cannabis industry.
Oh, absolutely.
Because how everything is always evolving and changing. So as far as speaking to the mindset and the reflective before somebody jumps into this career space, what is some advice you would give someone who would like to start a career in your industry? Like, what do they need to mentally prepare for? To, like, if they're excited. They see all the glitz and glam because they see some people making money, but not everybody makes it down that road. Some people quit in the early stage or gracefully bow out for whatever reasons. What is something that would really help them reflect and get them in the mindset to say, hey, I need to reflect on this to see if this is the industry for me?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question. The key is your why, your purpose of what you're doing. This is going to be, the hardest thing you've ever done. And even in my book, I'm telling you, the person that I asked, can I quit my job to work for you? He told me, he said, you can, sure. As he's sparking up his blunt, he tells me, yeah, sure. And he said, but this is the hardest thing you will ever do. I'm telling you right now. And I'm like, I was in the military. I worked on the flight deck of an aircraft carrier, did 2 deployments, literally had a concussion and went back to work until I realized I couldn't speak English from the concussion. So I'm like, I told him, I'm probably the strongest person you've ever met. He was not lying. I remember 2 years into it, I was thinking to myself, whoa, this is almost, especially back then, running a business with your hands like tied to the back. Like, how do you even do that? But again, getting creative. But my why is that I want to educate people of color on this subject matter, and not just about consumption, about the opportunities in the space that I think can help us as a community create a new economy where we can be completely independent, and we can do this, without social equity situations, because honestly, the way that I see that is putting us in another line, don't go to this line, go to this one. And then that line only has 5 spots, but there's 20 people ahead of you. That's how I see it, and the license that I was able to get here in San Diego since licensing became a thing back in 2016, none of them had anything to do with social equity or anything like that. And the process was way faster because you go through the process with everyone else. Now, do I think social equity is super important? 100%. That needs to be emphasized in not, in the application process. It needs to be emphasized in the ordinance, in the implementation of the cannabis program from within the system. Now, the way that I even talk about it in the book is like the government created this program. This disparity, they created it. So we're expecting them to create the solution. It's a little bit counterproductive in my opinion, because clearly they can't even get it right. They created the problem, and I don't think they ever thought that they would have to solve it. So right now they're scrambling. And obviously it's going to take us to as business and operators to incorporate that in the culture of cannabis, in doing business in cannabis. And that's, the way that I approach it in this space. But your why needs to be that strong. Like, it's bigger than me. I'm not doing this, to get financial gain. And I am, obviously it's a business. But if that was the sole reason, I would have been in another industry a long time ago. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, because you can make money anywhere, honestly, especially if you growing up in a family full of entrepreneurs. So, and I tell people that all the time, your why for what you do has to be so strong that
you'll do whatever it takes. It's whatever it takes. Like, I need this almost like oxygen, because if your why's not strong, when things get tough, you're just going to throw your hands up and quit and fold or want to do something else. But in cannabis, I'll tell you what, you have to make it a point to educate yourself, inform. You have to be informed, because in this space, you have to be an entrepreneur, an advocate, because you have to advocate for the plan. You have to advocate for, the people that have been affected most by cannabis prohibition and the war on drugs. And you have to educate individuals about the history, about the fact that this is a gentle plan. Nobody's going to die from this. Yeah. Actually, people will get benefits. We have an endocannabinoid system that actually is meant to process the cannabinoids in the cannabis plant. So, you have to educate, you have to advocate, and you have to, know your business. aspect of it. So that's my recommendation. Yeah.
I love it.
So get my book so you can, hear it in a little more detail.
Yeah, make sure y'all get the book.
The Successful Canna-preneur.
Now, what do you think the future has in store for this industry?
Oh, yes. The future, especially, I think the future seemed a little bit further prior to 2020. Obviously, because of the pandemic, because of COVID, the cannabis industry pretty much stuck out. People consumed even more when this happened. And it's only natural. I mean, usually people consume cannabis for the anxiety, to tone down anxiety, to tone down like mental health issues, and things of that nature, or just to like relax or take the edge off. I mean, you hear people when they indulge in that, obviously besides people with cancer and people with other things like children and autism and things like that, where they use CBD for that. The consumption of cannabis just went through the roof, at least in the first 3 months of the pandemic. So cannabis proved to be a pandemic-proof, recession-proof industry that can actually keep some of these cities that had the industries that were actually keeping those cities afloat completely eradicated. So the cities that had cannabis ordinances here in California and even in other legal states were able to latch onto that stream of income, which was brand new. If they hadn't approved cannabis, let's say the year before or the year or years before that, that would have been money that they wouldn't have access. And that happened a lot. That's why in the election, the real winner was cannabis. Every single initiative that was on the ballots passed, every single one. So the future is bright. Mexico just legalized, like we said earlier. Canada has been legal since 2018. So now we have America in the middle like this.
Like, put their hands up. Like, how come everybody out around us making money off of this?
The thing is, until America does not do right by the people that the prohibition affected, until there are people in jail for cannabis, the industry will not be legitimized as it should. So, there's steps, there's levels to this. And I think one of them is to create situations that would mend, or heal those cannabis prohibition costs. And it's going to take.
And I think it's we're on the horizon. I think America has a hard time looking at its true history and coming to terms with it, and then righting the wrongs that have been done.
Well, the thing is that righting the wrongs means admitting that you did something wrong. And if we really look at the circumstances, because this is with cannabis, and I talk about this in the book, you would really think that people went to jail for selling drugs or things like that. No, families were destroyed. You know how many kids grew up in a family where a parent went to jail for an ounce of pot, when right now that is normal to carry that in the person. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And not for a few months, not probation. Somebody, that's a federal crime. So somebody did time for that. Somebody's still doing time for that. So the social equity aspect to me goes beyond handing licenses to people, because what I said earlier, let me explain it a little bit in detail. The licenses are limited. So let's say here in Chula Vista, I believe there's like, 8 licenses for retail, 8 licenses for manufacturing. 8. So essentially, let's say you have a total of 40 licenses, right? That means only 40, maybe if you say people are partners, maybe 80 people will have access to have the licenses. But if you count the amount of people that were affected, arrested, if you, by the situation that would be social equity cannabis, it's going to be way more than 80. So how are you going to amend something with something that caused so much, turmoil, with 1 or 2 licenses that you dedicate for social equity? That's where my concern goes. And I think it's going to.
I think that number needs to rise.
I mean, so essentially you can't have a dispensary in every corner. That's just not going to happen, because the zoning restricts the amount of locations that you can get. So, and that's how it is for business. It's like you can have, obviously there's liquor stores everywhere. So perhaps, maybe we can have a dispensary. But, as it stands right now, they want you to be X amount of feet away from schools, from churches, from this, from that. In those circumstances, you create a limited amount of licenses that you can hand out. And then you take 3% of those, and that's what you dedicate for social equity.
I think there's another component that we probably may be missing here too. Just how like the lottery system gives a certain percentage of money back to the schools in different districts. Maybe in the cannabis space, the certain taxes, a percentage of that goes
hit
back
it right
to
in the nail. Absolutely.
The revitalization and rebuilding of those communities that were destroyed by this.
Absolutely. I talk about that in the book. That is where the government should be. That's their direction that they should be doing. All this millions of dollars that you're taxing. I mean, in California alone, it's about the operator pays like 40% in taxes, sometimes more. So all that money the taxation should go back into these communities, with specific programs that are created, and you can account. You know how they track the cannabis from seed to sale? They need to track that money from after the sale, and track it from inception at the locations, whether it's the dispensaries or the manufacturers or whatever. And then track it until it helps the community. Hey, this money went from here to here, and this is how we're undoing all this, situation that prohibition caused.
And then they can say, and we can say, hey, that money that y'all make from there, you can't put it into the other pots for all of society. This particular pot is strictly for these communities that was affected.
No pun intended with the pot. Oh yeah, pun intended.
We got puns all in there. All right, so man, this has been a powerful interview. Me and you could probably keep going for hours, but I don't want people driving for 2 hours trying to listen. So let's wrap it up with this. What projects are you currently working on, and where can people find you?
So please visit our website, synergyuniverse.io. So we are working pretty much what we talked about there earlier. We're working on creating cannabis content that reels people into understanding not just the plant from a scientific aspect, but, from the business aspect and the potential for the medical and benefits, just gathering a library of content that is educational, and it's meant, the intention is for people to identify opportunities in the space and then see how they can, contribute to that, and then make it a more open market for people to come in based on what they are into, like based on their purpose, based on the things that perhaps cannabis has helped them with and how they can take it further. And, from people that look like them, just normal people of, where it's inclusive for everybody, because there's so many people of color all over America doing so much work, to push this agenda forward, for the criminalization aspect of it, the advocacy aspect of it, the science aspect of it. So we have to be at the forefront. Yeah. And that's the only way that I believe social equity would actually take place, is if we take the initiative to claim a stake in the space. You know what I'm saying? Because then we have a voice in that, and that's what we're doing with Synergy Universe, just collecting thought leaders, and that are looking to create content based on their knowledge, and then getting that production done. Also, I do have a studio here in Chula Vista. So hit me up if you need content creation services. We definitely provide that through Synergy Studios. Check out our lifestyle brand, Boycott Shitty Weed. So let me talk a little bit about that before I go. So Boycott Shitty Weed on Instagram at Boycott Shitty Weed. So essentially it's a movement that we have started that focuses on the fact that high quality in cannabis is very important. Understanding like where the plant comes from, as far as like, if it can be contaminated, because as you know, it has to be tested. And when using pesticides, those kind of things can affect your body and not in a good way a lot of the times. So it's important to keep quality in mind in your consumption aspect, but also the fact that if there are cannabis companies out there that don't do anything to pursue social equity and inclusion or social justice. And to me, that's shady weed as well. It's not just about, the consumption and the quality. That is very important, but also understanding that what you're consuming, if it's not supporting your community, why are you even doing that? So that's what Boycott Shitty Weed is about. So please check us out.
I love every aspect of that. So I'm glad you came up with this lifestyle brand. And y'all make sure y'all boycott Shitty Weed.
It's a lifestyle.
It's a lifestyle. It's a movement. I didn't even know you could get. I feel like what you just told me is that you could get organic weed.
No, you can absolutely. A lot of the times, and this came from a bad experience that I had. Before I started working in the space, a friend of mine brought something that he bought, like, I don't know where he got it from, but essentially the thing ended up being contaminated with pesticides. And the experience was almost like we almost hallucinated. And honestly, with cannabis, there's no hallucination. That is not a side effect of cannabis. So, and then in getting that thing tested, and I wish I had recorded that because it has so many pesticides in it that I was literally smoking pesticides. Now, in the regulated space, the testing it's extreme. They test it almost at every level. And that's the one thing I would say in the regulated space, you can track, like, from if you have an edible and that edible caused you to feel some type of way, in the regulated space, they can track it all the way to the plant that it came from. Wow. So that is one. That's a good thing. Obviously in the regulated space, they're still working a lot of kinks, but that is one thing that I think it's important, especially for people that are starting out. So, but yeah.
Yeah. One more thing before we wrap up, edibles, because I realized we didn't really talk about edibles. What does this industry look like? If you give me your 2-minute riff.
That industry is right now. There's so many chefs cooking with cannabis, and it's a beautiful thing, in the sense that a lot of people are entering the industry in that manner. Where you are now using cannabis oils and cannabis derives like extracts or the leaves or and incorporate it, because the importance of the consumption is that you don't have to smoke it. So to me, the fact that there's an edibles market, it's a point of education, because a lot of people, smoking is bad for you, it doesn't matter. Well, guess what? This is actually a thing that you don't have to smoke. You can consume in a patch. You can consume it as a gum, mint, gummies. I've had medicated Doritos. I mean,
What? They got Doritos?
They have everything. I mean, I had an entire medicated burger, like a turkey burger.
Wow.
So essentially you make it into butter, the oil, or you can make it into an oil that you use in your dips and things like that. So it's so versatile. So I'm glad you brought that up, because I think that's usually a point of education, but the edibles market is huge for the people that don't like smoking, which is a lot of people. The edibles market, the gummies are like one of the number one selling items in cannabis. So people don't have to smoke it. You can consume it
Now so you telling us to boycott she-weed, is your company going to ever give us a list of companies we should be supporting?
We're working
as far
on
as
that.
Edibles and so forth?
We're working on that as far as we're going to create kind of like a listing and rank companies as far as like their inclusion of diversity, their inclusion and their initiatives of social equity and social justice. Specifically, like, for instance, locations like Los Angeles, where they're like the epicenter of cannabis prohibition criminalization. So there, because there are already laws in place and a lot of cannabis companies are involved and up and running, then we expect you to take, as a business, to take it upon yourself to mend that community. So we're going to have, not only are we going to be ranking the organizations, we're also going to be ranking the cities and their initiatives, because it starts there. If they're setting up these businesses for failure, then we can't. It starts with the regulation. If the regulation is shitty, what do you think is going to happen thereafter, So
you're not going to get the progress that you're looking for. So when you compile that list, I want to put it on our site, and I want to invite you back for a conversation so we can educate.
Absolutely. Yeah. So those are the initiatives we have going on. And I just want to thank you so much, Tyrell, for having me. This was, I told you I'm not a morning person, but this was so pleasant. I'm super appreciative. Thank you so much.
It was. Joanne, my sister, I appreciate you. I'm not a morning person either, but this is just as good as my cup of coffee.
Cheers.
Cheers. All right. Well, that has been another episode of Risepreneurs. I'm going to put all the show notes in there, the links, so you can catch my sister. And we're going to come back for you with another educational episode after we rank these companies and these cities and see who's really about this life.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Rise Urban Nation.
Thank you for taking the journey.
Be sure to like, comment, and smash that subscribe button. And stay connected with Terrell on and off the show. Follow at Rise Urban Nation on all platforms.
Do what you love what you do. Don't chase the money. Let the money chase you.